Welcome to the very next episode of The Remedy with Tova Sido and
Janice Gaunt and
Tom Bridwell.
Yay!
Welcome back, Tom Bridwell.
Oh, thank you very much.
Tom has been in Augusta, Georgia.
Lucky dog.
We got us.
Our producer went to the Masters, and all we got were bucket hats.
I got a visor, and that was plenty for me. Thank you very much.
It's so nice. So, were you pulling for Rom?
Absolutely. I think most people that aren't into the live scene were pulling for Koepka to lose.
Yeah.
And especially maybe after watching him on that documentary. But you know, now that it's behind us, I mean, he really wasn't that bad. He was cool. I don't know if you noticed, he was the only live guy that didn't wear his team uniform. So
Is that what Mickelson was wearing?
Yes, that
all
FF,
black sitch.
Yes. Well, he usually wears all black, but there's that FF was the logo for his team on the live tour.
See, I was shocked. I'm not privy to that. I wouldn't know that. I was actually shocked that they didn't have like a hat that said live.
Mm-hmm. They were just wearing their uniforms for live.
Oh,
but Brooks did not. He wore his normal Nike.
Oh.
And that may be a contract thing that he has to abide by with
Yeah, I
Nike.
bet it is.
But he certainly did not bring any of the. He didn't talk about live. He didn't. He was definitely minding his P's and Q's.
Respectful of it.
Yes.
I'm actually. Yes. So the ones that were on the leaderboard that were live were Koepka, Mickelson. Who else?
Reed.
Oh, Reed,
the most hated golfer of all.
You think so?
Oh, he's big time. He's a cheater. I mean, there's like 4 or 5 instances of like video proof of him cheating since he's been on the PGA Tour. And then he was accused of it in college as well, including like stealing from his lockers, his teammates' lockers.
Oh my!
Wow!
Because he went to Augusta Community College in Augusta.
Wow, I didn't know that.
Yes.
I didn't know that about him.
That course anyway.
I know Phil's pretty hated too.
Oh, I know him. I know he and Amy.
Oh, really?
And they're so nice.
Are they?
Yes, they're so nice.
I don't have an opinion.
Yeah. But I mean, I think people are mad at him for but you know.
Yeah, whatever.
Yeah, I don't have time to care
People
about
get
that
mad
much.
about everything.
Well, that's a
very good topic.
That's
for
a great
today.
tie into our conversation today. We are actually talking about how do we manage, if that's the right word, cope with all of the hate in the world today. We actually had a girl, her name is Stephanie Harold. She's so precious. She's a big listener, big fan, and she sponsored this episode asking if we would. She texted me after the Nashville shooting and was just really upset about that. And then, I mean, she was upset about that, but then she was even more upset about all the hate about it on Instagram. She's like, you get online and all you do is read the hate about the thing that you hate to hear about. So that's what we're going to tackle today. But before we do, thank you, Stephanie.
Thank you, Stephanie, for listening and for the topic.
Yes, I have to tell you guys a story about that song, our entry song. So, Tom, remember I told you there was a listener who's like a big fan of yours, and he was going to be at the Masters?
The Uber guy?
Yeah.
Yes.
So he was just kind of having a rough day at the Masters, and I mean, he was working really hard, and he loves listening to our podcast. He's a huge fan. He's always up to date, and he always gives me tips about our podcast, which I really love. He's super young and hip. Anyway, he was having a shit day at the Masters because he was working his butt off, and they opened up the trailer. I guess it was the Uber trailer, and the song that was playing was that song.
It was?
Yeah.
Oh,
My
that's
God has
fun.
a telephone.
That's awesome.
And he was like, this is like such a sign for me, like such a sign of comfort for me from God. And he was like, so he recorded it and videoed it, and he was like, listen to what song is playing right now. And he's like, man, that's awesome. He
That
just felt
is
like it
really
was such a
awesome.
little sign from God, like it's all gonna be okay.
Yeah, that's great.
Yeah, it was really cute. Okay, so who wants to tackle this conversation on how do we deal with hate in the world? I mean, there's a lot of things to get angry about
Well,
if you choose to.
well, we're
lot of
not,
people
well,
seem to.
We can't eliminate hate. It's the antithesis of love, and so the world has, it's like black and white, right, wrong, good, bad, love, hate, all of that. All of that is going to be there. I think the thing that is so concerning right now, but it's been going on a while around the world, are these shootings that people are so bent out of shape, and that's where they're going with it. And I think that's what is really interesting, and I think it's interesting to talk about, because there's no way we can get rid of hate from humans. You know, I mean, we can talk about love and everything all day long, but there is going to be some of that because of, you know, racism and just people in general, people that are angry, people that are hurt, people that are sad, people with mental illness, and all sorts of things that end up, you know, having aggression in our world is not going to end. I wish that we could come up with a way of allowing people to be disturbed and unhappy with other people without the violence. I think the violence along with the hate is what is really, because the violence is the behavior that happens as a result of the hate. And I think that's what we tend to, I think that's almost some of the things that we can educate people about, and they maybe make a difference in that.
And I also believe that we could manage ourselves a little bit. I mean, I don't follow anything or anyone that's super controversial because I don't want to read any of that stuff. I don't have enough of an opinion about almost, and I mean, there's a lot of things I actually have an opinion about, but I don't have a visceral response to a lot of things.
Yeah, me neither. Well, actually, that's really not true. I have a pretty strong visceral response to child abuse. That's probably my most
I mean, yes,
disturbing.
I hate that. I hate racism. I hate people who abuse animals. There's things that I don't like, but when I think of visceral, I'm not going to lash out. I'm not going to get on Instagram and make a big statement. I'm not going to slander somebody else. I mean, I'm just not going to put my energy into that cesspool. I guess when I think about a visceral response, I mean, I definitely have strong opinions about injustice and hate and abuse. I mean, being abused myself, I have very strong opinions about child abuse. And I believe
Absolutely, wholeheartedly, that child abuse is one of the areas that contribute to aggression. You know, there's when I worked, I've talked about this before, worked at the Dallas County Judicial Treatment Center, and we treated men who were convicted of drug-related felonies, and they were all addicts. So they would come from the courthouse to us, and then they lived there for 6 weeks. And we had Bloods and Crips in there, and it was, you know, there was a lot of violence. And when we worked with those prisoners, they were, they all of them had been abused, and they were all physically punished. I'm not a believer in spanking at all, but there was just it's so in the culture for these men, and it was so disturbing and sad because they just didn't know other ways to do it.
Right. There's still, I think those are just all repeating itself again and again, because usually whatever you grow up with, you think, I don't know why, but when I was young and my mom was violent with us, I could look at that and think to myself, I will never do this to my children. Do you think most people grow up thinking that, but then they end up repeating the behavior anyway?
Well, I think they hate it when it's being done to them, but I think that is, I always say that spanking is a lazy man's punishment.
Yeah.
And I think that, it happened to me, and that I think that sort of repetition of behavior, I think we've come a long way around that, because we've learned it really doesn't work. There's much better ways.
We need to say that again.
Yeah.
Hitting your children
does not work. No, it doesn't.
No, it just scares the living shit out of them.
It might work for a second. They might stop what they're doing for a second, but it doesn't get rid of the behavior.
Yeah, being hit by my mom.
Yeah,
her violent behavior it didn't teach me anything.
Well, and when you hit a child, you are transferring that energy into that child's body. It is a transference of rage. And so that's what, when I worked with all of those guys, it was such a, this is going to sound weird, but it was such a fun environment, because they were all in there for treatment and they were vulnerable. And like I said, I do group therapy, and I'd have 4 Crips on one side of the room, and it was really interesting, but they all were just precious to their core because of their human. Of course. They're humans. And I don't know. I think that I think that all of the shootings, which is kind of what we were starting to talk about a little bit, I think that's the most disturbing for me, because I think that it is, I think there's a lot of times there's some mental illness involved, and you have people who have hallucinations, and hear voices with people telling them to go out and massacre people or all of that. And I think that...
And that's real to them.
Yeah, it's real to them. Yeah, if they have that sort of a mental illness, it really is. And I think that is... I think that is the thing that is the scariest. It was interesting because I can't remember what shooting it was. It was one, Tom and I had gone on a trip, and I was in the airport waiting for Tom to meet me there. And it was like the day after a shooting, and it was been like a couple of years ago. And I was sitting in the airport, and I thought, okay, if somebody walks into this airport with a gun, because I was in the area that hadn't gone through security, where would I hide? And every now and then I'll find myself doing that. Like I was at North Park the other day, and there were a lot of armed policemen there, and I got real kind of creeped out. But I was looking around, and I thought, where would I go if I heard gunshot and I couldn't run out the door? And I looked around and thought, a dressing room or under a desk, it was, and I thought, that's so sad.
Yeah, that is really sad. I haven't had that thought.
Think that.
I haven't had that thought yet.
Yeah. I have, and I thought,
I think I just hit the deck. What would you do?
Well, I would hide somewhere. You know, I mean, when I was in that airport, I was like, I saw a desk in a corner, and I thought I would go get underneath that desk
over there.
That's where I would go if I heard, and be scared to death to wait for somebody to, you know. But I thought it was just so weird. And when Tom landed, I said,
sad.
Listen to how sad this is. Oh, I know where I was. I think we were in Boise, Idaho. And I thought, you know, how sad that's where we are. You know?
And then, so just a quick question about that. And this might be too personal. If it is for you or Tom, then you don't have to answer it. But when you hear about a shooting like the one in Nashville, where does your mind go? I know where my mind goes about the victims. I mean, we're just all so sad. I imagine that you're so sad too. But where does your mind go to the shooter? Well,
what do you mean?
Like what are your thoughts about the person with the gun, the person who did the shooting?
Well, I think
where do you go?
Well, I go to I think the first thing I think is that they were probably abused growing up. I also think that, you know, in that particular case, because that child had an identity issue.
I have no idea. I don't know anything about the shooting.
Yeah, she
I'd read nothing
she was
about it.
Like unidentified gender, and it was a real fundamental school,
like fundamental religious Christian school.
Fundamental school, Christian fundamentally, and I don't know this, but I thought, I wonder if she had been shamed because of that,
because she went to the school.
She went to the school.
Okay.
Yes, and that's my understanding, and I did think about that, and I thought, you know, it's so hard for an adolescent to have to, in even just their own struggle with that sort of an identity issue, would just be really, really, really tragic. I can't even imagine.
So how old was the shooter?
I'm not sure. Tom, do you know? Like 15 maybe? Or did I make that up?
She was in her early 20s.
Oh, okay.
Yes.
Okay.
And she was born a male and was a female at the time of the shooting.
Oh.
Yes.
Oh, I did not know that.
Yeah,
I knew there was something,
transgender.
but I didn't know. I knew there was some sort of thing.
Yes.
So she didn't say anything. She didn't leave a note or like.
She did have a manifesto. I don't know how much of that has been released to the public, but she definitely, they found some stuff in her apartment.
Oh, they did?
She had a bunch of friends that were, and this is how it seems like it always is. There's like friends that are like, yeah, we thought there was something weird about, she was angry and unstable, and it seems like it's always too late before somebody figures it out or tries to help.
What was the manifesto about? Do you know?
I don't think they've released any of it to the public.
Oh, got it.
Well, Tom, did she go to that school?
She did go to that school. So she was an ex-student, and she was obviously just going back to hurt the school. I'm not sure that, I think she would have shot anybody.
Right.
But
yeah, it was
unfortunately, there
random.
was a few kids and a few teachers. It could have been the custodian. It could have been just it could have been parents if they had been there. I think
it
she
was just
going
targeted
back.
to the
She
school.
was targeting the school itself.
Got it.
Well, and you know, I think that's really interesting, and I could imagine that in that conservative of a environment, that there probably were some people that might have bullied her in some way about that gender stuff.
Sure.
And I understand that, and I that makes me sad too, to think that it's the, you know, the live and let live attitude that people don't seem to have because they think that they're so right, and if somebody's different, they're wrong, and that some of that sort of thing. I mean, gender identity doesn't have anything to do with Christianity or God or Judaism or any of it, but there are a lot of people who are really rigid about that and hate. They, they manifest that anger and hate towards anybody that is different that they don't understand.
Yep. So that's what I was going to point out is your mind goes to a place to try to understand. Maybe, and I know you're not a big news watcher and you probably weren't obsessing about the incident, but your default in that specific scenario wasn't to find judgment against the shooter. It was to try to find understanding. Am I right?
Mm-hmm. My brain always goes to, whoa, what was going on there and where that was and all of that. If she had been teased and bullied and all of that, and what was it inside of her that
created such anger and hate?
Yeah. And hurt.
Vengeance.
Because hate is it's a cover up for hurt.
Oh yes, it is.
It's
such a good
fear.
thing you said. Yeah. I'm so glad you said that. It is so true. And a lot of people who come for counseling, when I say something like, you don't like, okay, there's energy behind that. Like, let's talk about that.
Yeah.
And the hate is the pain. So let's talk about the pain instead of talking about the hate.
Yeah.
Because hate to me is just not productive.
No. And the thing that's so interesting about something like that is that what most people don't understand, and I'm one of them, I don't know what it would be like to be a 20-year-old young adult that has had gender issues and all of the ridicule and the teasing and the bullying and the misunderstanding, because I can't identify with that because I'm not that. I have had clients who have struggled with that issue, and I can understand that. And most of them do have a real struggle when they're out in the world because of their parents or have a hard time understanding that. I mean, as a parent, it would be difficult. I would hope that I had the open-mindedness that if one of my grandchildren came to me, and let's say one of my granddaughters, and said, I really feel like I am a guy inside and I want to, I would say,
explore that.
I want to explore that. And I would say, okay, well, I love you very much. And whatever works for you is going to be okay with me, but I just think it would be a real struggle.
That's the thing about any of this stuff. Like, if given the choice, I mean, I would never choose that.
No,
like
you wouldn't.
I would never choose that. When people say it's just a choice, I'm not saying that there are not people who haven't made that choice or whatever, but I can't imagine a world where somebody would invite that kind of hard into your life.
Yeah.
Yeah. So what about you, Tom? When you read or hear or watch all this stuff about, let's just take Nashville, for instance, where does your mind go with the shooter?
Usually first thing I think of is, golly, what could they have been thinking? How could they choose to bring other innocent people down with them? I understand suicide, which makes up 54% of the gun deaths in America, by the way.
Yep.
Really?
Yes, 54%.
54%
of gun
deaths are suicide?
Yes. So,
I did not know that.
And most people go in and buy a gun and then use it that day.
So I don't understand. The first thing I think of is, man,
didn't know that.
I feel bad for this person because they wanted to kill themselves. But then it immediately turns to hate and judgment when I realize that they were so cowardly that they were basically wanting to bring other people down with them. Like they couldn't just rid the world of themselves. They have to do it to where other people have to die and suffer.
Right.
And it's not only the people that get killed, it's the families and the loved ones that they leave behind.
So
I mean,
layered.
it's such a, it takes it to another level of evil that I can't really fathom. And then when you throw the fact that these were children, a 9-year-old or 2 9-year-olds, it really makes it to where it's just, it's hard not to be judgy, and I don't really care about them and their problems. You know what I'm saying? Like, I can't look at it the way that Janice does. I hope that they're burning in hell.
That's why I think it's important to get different views.
Well, this is what, so anyone that kills themselves after killing other people are doing so because they not only are bringing other people in with that hate, but they hate themselves.
Yes.
Their self. And so they are in a terrible mental place that none of us can understand unless you have been there, you know. And yeah, it's just, it's so difficult to think, okay, well, and I don't disagree with you, Tom, because I can have compassion for that person that kills himself for sure. But it's hard to have compassion along with the anger for the lives that were taken. You know, and the whole mental state of someone that is going to walk into a school or walk into a concert or walk into a mall and shoot people is very, 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 very sick.
Definitely.
You know, and, you know, we were talking a little bit, you know, in it was in 1996, Australia passed, it was called the National Firearms Agreement, after a mass shooting that was in Tasmania. And there, a 28-year-old man armed with a semi-automatic rifle shot and killed 35 people and injured 18 others. And then the legislature or the cabinet, I don't know what the Australian government, I don't know what it's called, but they all got together and they decided that they were going to take steps to eliminate those sort of mass shootings. And what they did, and that was an election year like the year after, and they were told, you know, by all of the proponents of guns and the right to have arms, you know, they said, well, you guys are not going to be reelected because there's such a strong advocacy for gun ownership. And the whole entire thing, they agreed that if they lost their job, it would be worth it because they would be saving lives. And so what they did when they passed that, they banned certain semi-automatic and self-loading rifles and shotguns. And because what this guy did, he had some sort of I don't know what it was called, some sort of something that you can put on the gun that even makes it more rapidly shooting.
Good Lord.
And that's why, I mean, they killed 35 people and injured 18 others. And so what the Australian government did is they banned guns, banned ownership of gun.
Any kind of gun.
And they offered a buyback system. And so they confiscated guns. And so they bought, like if you had a semi-automatic rifle, then they would buy it back. And it's still underway. And I mean, it is, and
you said it since 1996? Wow.
And
that's a long time. I knew that, but I didn't know how long that had been the case.
It says, during the buyback program, Australians sold 640,000 prohibited firearms to the government and voluntarily surrendered about 60,000 non-prohibited firearms. So I guess they didn't prohibit all. In all, more than 700,000 weapons were surrendered, according to a Library of Congress. And then in 2002, Australia further tightened gun laws, restricting the caliber, barrel length, and capacity for sports shooting handguns. I mean, they took it so seriously.
I commend them for trying. I mean, it's a step in the right direction, and it's proof that there can be some success with just a few small changes.
Yeah.
And those sound like big changes. I mean, actually
they were
banning certain
big.
guns
Huge.
is a big change. But we can't even make the smallest rules change to some stuff.
To your point, Tom, I've often thought that. Like, I don't know what the answer is. I really don't. I don't, and I don't have big opinions. I mean, I have big opinions about gun violence. I have big opinions about things like the shooting in Nashville, but I don't have a big opinion about, somebody owning a gun. But what surprises me as a person, I mean, I'm not the smartest person in the room, but I'm certainly not the dumbest. And I'm just shocked that as a society, we have not figured out how to get some regulation around this.
Well, the thing that is ridiculous in my mind, and y'all may agree or disagree, is that it's too freaking easy to go into a gun store
absolutely,
and buy a gun.
I agree.
I have a client who went into a store, bought a gun, went to the car, and shot herself.
Do you guys remember lawn darts?
No.
Okay, you remember lawn darts? It was something you played in your backyard. They were like basically a dart, but it was larger than a normal sized dart. But you would like throw it in your lawn, and there'd be like a hula hoop sized target. Anyway, they were called jarts, and lawn darts was a thing in the 80s, the 70s. Those got banned because a couple kids got killed, so you can't buy lawn darts anymore.
Damn.
Yeah.
You remember?
Okay.
You remember when we could buy Sudafed, like cold medicine?
Yeah.
Well, they started making meth with it, and they banned you can't buy it. There's only a certain amount you can buy now.
So if I go get Sudafed, I have to give my license?
There's only a certain amount that you can buy. You can't just go buy
in there and buy
5 boxes of it. They limit.
What if I buy 5 today and then I buy 5 tomorrow?
You probably could, but the point I'm trying to make is when they figured out that people were making meth with it, they changed the amount that you can buy. It's all it took.
Oh, yeah.
I see where you're going with this.
And I'm saying there's the list goes on and on of things that we did fix with, for example, seat belts.
Yeah.
We fixed a problem with seat belts.
Yeah, and people didn't like that one bit.
But it can be done.
Well, and but I think the thing is, I think that the American Rifle Association and some of those groups that manufacture guns and all this stuff, they have a huge influence in Congress, and they donate a lot of money to the politicians that support that. Go ahead and say it, Tom.
Yeah.
Trump.
Yeah. No, I hear you. I mean, to be quite honest, this isn't. I don't think this is a red or blue thing. I mean, I think most people think there should be some pretty sensible gun laws on the left. I'm one of them. I would consider myself to be more left than right, and I own guns, and I think banning guns is the absolute wrong answer. But I am certainly willing to hear somebody talk about some changes.
Yeah.
Whereas
I think you're exactly right, Tom, because I lean a little more towards the right, and I'm thinking the exact same thing. And I mean, there's things I love about the left and right, but I lean more right, and I'm thinking the same thing. Like, okay, I don't have a gun, but I don't care that you have a gun. I would like to make sure that Betsy, your daughter, can't get your gun.
Yeah.
And I would like to make sure that somebody with a mental illness can't get a gun.
Yeah, but here's the thing about that. So you go in, if you have a mental illness, you don't carry a card that says I have a mental illness, just so you know. And there's not an index. What's your last name? Is there an index? Because it's all confidential.
Test.
Anything like that, And so,
are you sound to carry this?
Yeah.
This?
Are you?
No.
Yeah.
No, you're right.
I'm crazy.
You're right. You're absolutely right that there isn't a card carrying crazy person out there, but there are a lot of things that are harder to do now than get a gun.
And I like your point with that.
Yeah, that's
Tom.
a really good point. You can't, it's harder to get Sudafed than it is to buy a semi-automatic rifle.
Yeah. Do you remember the movie Parenthood back in the 80s?
Oh, yeah.
Do you remember that great line where I can't remember who said it? But he was like, he was mad at his dad. He didn't think his dad was a good dad. And he said something to the effect, and I'm going to butcher it, but it was brilliant. He was like, you've got to have a license to drive. You've got to have a license to fish. But any old asshole can become a dad.
That's true.
Yeah.
And I was like, oh my gosh, that is a brilliant line.
Yes.
Like, all these regulations to go catch a fish. I've got to sign up to hike this trail, but I could birth a child. Like, it's kind of like we're on the same, like, it's like,
Yeah.
but it is hard. It is so hard to regulate these things. I mean,
really
it didn't
is.
sound like it was hard for Australia, but I wonder what they did with all of those guns.
I don't know.
Maybe they recycled them or something.
I don't know. Let me see if this article says.
Not that it matters, but
Yeah.
so I'm wondering, so to the point that Stephanie, who asked us to talk about this, she talked about how upsetting the whole thing was for her. The whole shooting in Nashville was for her because of a private Christian school, and so many children in our neighborhoods and that we know attend these private Christian schools, and we are under the assumption that if they go there, nothing's going to happen to them.
Yeah.
And so you feel really violated as a parent. You can feel especially violated as a parent of a child who goes to private or a religious private institution. And it's good, like this feeling that nobody's protected. So she's upset about that. Fair. But then she was talking about how upsetting it was to get online and read. I mean, I can't even imagine. I didn't read or see any of it, but all of the opinions spouting out and all the hate spouting out about the injustice of innocent people dying at the hands of someone who's not stable for whatever reason. And so I guess to that point, her question was, it makes her very upset. I'm sure she's not the only one. It gets her real riled up. It creates fear and anxiety in a lot of people. So how do we navigate the response to the things about life that make no sense?
Well, I mean, I think you have to, if you are an advocate of something that can make changes, then you can do that. I contribute to an organization that is working to restrict some gun laws, and they, and I was telling, when I decided to do that, I told Tom, I said, I'm doing this for my grandchildren, but I think that we can take some action towards it that will help us get through that. We're not going to, the world's a scary place. It always has been.
Yes.
It has never.
Read the Bible. This didn't just start here.
Or the Wild West.
Yeah.
It's just, it's. I think that I do think that the issues that could help are making it hard to get into schools. Tom and I went to Grandparents' Day at Higher the other day,
which is a local elementary school that my grandchildren go to, 3 of them. And so, and it was like, it took, because there were so many grandparents that were there, it took like 30 minutes to get in. You had to have your driver's license. You had to know where who your grandchild's teacher was. And then they would make you a name tag, and nobody could come in without a name tag. And they did make it really hard because the doors are locked all the time. Is there like a thing to walk through?
No, at
metal
higher
detector. There was one in my children's elementary and middle school and high school.
Yeah, no, there's not one. I don't think there's one at the high school either.
It actually makes me feel safe.
Yeah.
I like that there's a metal detector at my kids' school.
But they, but so, I mean, I do think that we can't, there's a level of acceptance that we have to be okay, that the world is not going to be okay.
That's good.
Because we have humans on the world.
And a lot of those humans are in a lot of pain.
A lot of pain.
Yeah, they really are. I think about it a lot. Like driving here today, I was driving down Northwest Highway, turned left on the tollway, and there was a huge, big truck in front of me, like a long, long, long truck. And it was turning left from Northwest Highway onto the toll road, where that turn is very narrow.
Yeah, very narrow.
And so I'm wondering, how's the truck going to make the turn? Well, he had to sit through 3 lights because nobody was making room for him. So I actually had compassion for this guy because I don't want to drive that truck. It's a big truck, little intersection, and nobody's letting him go, But I was the first car behind the truck. So then there was a line behind me. Everybody behind me is going bananas, laying on their horn. I'm like, y'all, like, if you could only
just breathe.
Exactly, if you could only see what I could see, you would not be so animated about. It's not because he's on his phone. I mean, he just can't make the turn.
Yeah.
He wants to make the turn. But I think that's actually a really good analogy for a lot of the pain in this world is, a lot of things that we get all torqued up about, we can't see.
Yeah.
And it's like if we really could see the whole picture, like let's just create a story. I don't know the story, but let's create a story where this person who shot up the school had came from violence, only knew violence, had been bullied her whole life, felt like the school was to blame for all of her pain, her pain, like and she has no idea how to cope with that pain, and she's just sitting in that pain, and she made a horrible decision about what to do with that pain. I would hope that somebody else might call a therapist or might call, just get help, go check yourself in somewhere.
Yeah, but most people don't do that.
And most people don't have the means to do that.
Yeah. And I think that it's not, so even when we think about that woman that walked into that school, we know for certain that she was in pain. We know that. People don't typically make violent efforts unless they are in pain. They're either scared, sad, lonely, or angry, and so it's not an either or.
Or like very mentally ill.
And if we can have compassion that for that pain that woman was feeling, and especially compassion for the people who were affected by that shooting, and trying really hard not to put hate energy into the world along with that. Now, the families that were affected, yes, they're going to be mad as hornets, hate. They're, but for those of us who are bystanders and watchers and hearers of the things that go on, if we can in our soul kind of have compassion for the people who are doing the violence, because they're messes.
Yes, they are. And I am aligned with your thinking. I also understand, people who are just livid. I understand you, Tom. I understand, I hope she's burning in hell. Like while I feel the way that I do,
I don't believe in hell. Sorry.
well, wherever she is, you hope she's burning. I understand. But what I think that the whole point I'm trying to make is if we could tap the brakes on the how all the, I mean, it's already enough. There's already enough hurt and pain and anger and hate in the world. It's like, I know what I think about things, and I know what you think about things, Janice. I now know what you think, Tom, about this. And I don't think you're wrong and I'm right. I just think you think the way you think. You're different. And I just think we're different. Exactly. Yeah. So it's not only having tolerance for the world, but I think it's having tolerance for each other. Like, just because I think this way doesn't mean I'm right.
Right. Well, I think that, what I learned so much working with those criminals was compassion for them, because I know their past. I knew their history. I knew all the things that they had experienced. It didn't justify their violence.
Right.
It's not an excuse.
Right.
But if you can try to put a little compassion into that situation, even for a minute, if you think about that girl that went in that school and thought, my heart aches for her because she was aching, and have that along with the heartbreak that all of those people felt. So it's kind of like, how, can we do that? I mean, because if we are hating the haters, we're putting hate into the world more, and so if we can pull back a little, you're not going to eliminate it. We're not going to ever be like, oh, bless her heart. Right. She was that was terrible. She was a mess.
Right.
She was, but no, it's stronger than that. Yes, it's sickening that she was that sick to do that. So I don't know.
So you've got social media is probably the worst place to go to read about any of this stuff.
Oh my gosh, I don't.
That's why
I do not.
I think people who. That's why I believe if you're affected by social media, get off.
Yes.
Like stop reading those things. Like it just becomes, I don't at all. And it's not even because I would get worked up. That would waste my time.
Yeah.
It does not move my needle one way or the other. And I just feel like if you are anxious or angry, or if that gets your heart racing, just don't do it to yourself.
Yeah, you might as well give a razor blade and be cutting on yourself, because that's what you're doing mentally.
Yes.
One of the things that my dad always said to me growing up was, just bless them. And I'm like, well, what do you mean? Bless the people that did blah, blah, blah? And he goes, yes, just bless them. And he said, because that's love. And, I don't. Now, somebody does something to one of my family members, that would be very difficult for that to come out of my mouth. But I think as we're reading about stuff like this, if you have to read about it, then if you can have some compassion for that sick person, that doesn't mean it's justifying the behavior.
Yeah, I think that's a really important thing to say.
And then you clear your body of the hate that you feel towards the shooter, because then that's affecting your body and your stress and your heart rate and your blood pressure and all of that. Your mood. I mean, because we can't just. That day I was in North Park, and it was weird. I don't know what had happened. But I thought, oh, maybe I shouldn't come to North Park anymore. And I was like, no, I'm not going to do that. I mean, I'm not going to go
You're not gonna
looking
not
for it. Yeah, but I'm not going to not live.
I read a quote years ago. It's one of my favorite quotes to use when I teach Bible study. I've used it 1,000 times, and anybody who's ever been in one of my Bible studies has heard me say it. And I don't even remember who said it, but it says, when we begin to understand, then we can truly love.
Mm-hmm.
And that made a really big impact on me. And it's just like, you never know. You never, and you and I know that. I mean, we see people all day, every day who appear to have perfect marriages and perfect children and perfect lives and perfect finances. And we get a backdoor invitation into some of their very real struggles. And so you and I are very aware that if it's shiny and pretty, it doesn't mean it's shiny and pretty.
Right.
But I think that it's just really important to remember that a lot of people are going through a lot.
Yeah. You know, one of the, what was that you said?
When we begin to understand, then we can truly love.
Yeah. There is a saying in Al-Anon. Al-Anon has all these sayings. They're just the best. Mm-hmm. And one of them is, let it begin with me. Mm-hmm. So if we are disturbed by the violence, then let it begin with me. Let me have compassion. Let me watch my energy level. Let me watch how often am I being critical of somebody or something. And I love that thought. Good. Yeah. So we can't do much. We can do a little, but we just let it begin with me.
That's so good. I think that's a great place to end.
Okay.
I love it.
Okay, adios.
Well, it's kind of a sad subject, but I do appreciate Stephanie writing in.
Me too, Stephanie, because that's the sort of thing that we as people, when we are feeling really disturbed about it, really need to talk about it. Mm-hmm. You don't have to go to a therapist. You can talk with your partner or your spouse, as long as you're not going to get in a big debate, or talk to your friends. I'm just so sad about this, because the whole energy around it is sad. And there's no shame in having feelings about any of it.
And when you have children and grandchildren, especially you, Tom, looking at Betsy, who's around the same age as Betty, sorry, around the same age as those innocent victims, it's so easy to put yourself in that position and get riled up about the injustice of innocence.
Yep.
It's heartbreaking. It is.
It is heartbreaking. So thank you, Stephanie, for writing in. Thank you to all of you for listening. We love and appreciate you all. Hope you have an amazing week. Bye.
Bye-bye.
And don't forget, our God has a telephone.
Ring, ring. Hey, what's happening?